I think when you look at the people who really, sacrificed their lives and were leaders of this, I mean, without them, we wouldn't be sitting here as, Korea, So I really think that they have some sense of not a heavy obligation, but just to recognize what they did. But the problem is the story that's been told is not as attractive as it really is. The story that should be told commands more respect and compassion, where, today it's just almost like commercialization, like a Hallmark holiday. But I've been fighting with them because they let the grave kind of go. It's only square blocks and stuff, but all the grout is gone. That's coming away. They let the moss grow on it. I built houses in construction, and I know how easy it is. You got to stay on it. And to me, this guy's the number one patriot, and and it's in Gangnam. It's the Gangnam City runs it. It's like with Kim Gu. Kim Gu's everything to Koreans. Dosan got him out of jail when he met Ito. Dosan worked with him. If you look at all the old pictures and you know that the central figure in the picture is the key guy, Dosan's in the middle. Kim Gu's way out on the end because he's a security guard. Don't get me wrong. He's a great patriot. He's important. But the way they have the historical hierarchy is a little askew.
When you were describing it, I couldn't help but think of the idea that if you put two Koreans in a room, they'll create three political parties. My party, your party, and Uri party or something like that. Like, to get Koreans on the same side is very, very difficult. And I don't say this, my politics professors would teach me this, and taxi drivers will say this to me, that when Koreans do things well is when they're united, but one of the biggest challenges is to get Korean people on the same page or singing from the same sheet. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Korea Deconstructed. Thank you very much for being here. I got a wonderful guest. We've just spent the last 20 minutes or so talking about surfing and Ide and all these other things, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But Philip Ahn Cuddy, you come from a special lineage.
Very special.
Let's start with this. Let's start with the lineage, please.
So big lineage is Anmu, who brought Neo-Confucius thought from China to Korea in 1390.
So you're to blame for Confucianism in this country.
Exactly. But, the well-known one is Dosan Ahn Chang-ho. He's my grandfather. I'm the Weisonja. And my grandmother is Lee Ryeon, and they both are from Pyongyang. So that, to me, if it wasn't for Dosan Ahn Chang-ho, Korea would still be Japan. And he's not as well known as he should be. People know his name really well, but they really don't know the story because it's pretty controversial in some ways. And so we can get into that. But I'm really proud of my Korean heritage. And, my mom is Susan Ahn Cuddy, who was the first Asian woman in the United States Navy. And she was a gunnery officer. And then she worked for Naval Intelligence. And then she went to the National Security Agency. And from 1950 to 1959, she ran the USSR division. And my dad, who's Irish, Frank Cuddy, he was a code breaker. He spoke Japanese. He was born in Baltimore, so I have no idea how he learned Japanese. But he broke the code at Midway, and also the code to shoot Yamamoto down over the Solomon Islands. So, so it's a wild story. And then Philippon, my uncle, who I'm named after, was a famous actor in Hollywood. And so he has a star on the Walk of Fame. And I tell people I can go to a bar, drink too much, and lie, and it's more believable than the truth. But I really appreciate the opportunity that you've given me. Thank you.
It must, before we talk about Dosan, how does it feel to look up and see that as lineage? Is it inspiring? Is it daunting? Is it just simply relatives, like we all have relatives?
It's all of the above, because, when I was a young kid, it was just a family, I really didn't know. My grandfather wasn't around, and I knew that he had sacrificed his life for the freedom of Korea, but not much else. But it's a burden, part of the burden is because I'm half, and the other is being the Wei Sonja, which is not as strong lineage as the Chin Sonjas, but the Chin Sonjas don't do anything. But I also feel very lucky, to have that kind of heritage and on both sides. And I was at Seoul National University having lunch with the president one time, long time ago. And he was talking about the tree with roots and that Korean traditional story. And I looked at it and I said, well, don't you think a tree with 2 roots is stronger than a tree with 1? You don't know what to say. But yeah, I feel very fortunate.
Wei Sonja would be maternal.
Yes.
From the maternal line.
Yes.
And that Wei is the same. I'm just thinking out loud now. It's the same as Weiguk, is the same as outside, isn't it?
Yeah, because
which is kind of
the term for me besides tigi, which meant half cow, half donkey.
Yeah.
And I would say, well, which one do you want? I mean, they're both not.
Yeah.
But Songnam, unperson.
Mm-hmm.
So in old Korean tradition, I was an unperson.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be an unperson for a variety of reasons. But so being an outsider, that's how, that's what in Korea I grew up as the outsider because I wasn't the real grandson. Mm-hmm. But I don't care.
I believe you. Let's talk about Dosan.
Okay.
Because for the past week, once we agreed to do this, and I'm so grateful that you're here, I've been asking just students, just casually, Dosan, like, tell me something. And they tell me about the park. And what I realized is most people, every Korean student that I know knows the name.
Right.
And a few little things. But I don't think we've ever talked about him on the podcast. And I'm not sure how many non-Korean speakers will know about this. So can we do 101?
Sure, certainly.
Grandfather.
Yes. So yeah, Dosan has a park. I lecture students that come to America from is it Namseol Daehak?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a program, so they would come every year. And by the time I ended the 101 with them, they were shocked. And so what they told me that, as time went by, he became a couple pages in a history book, one question on the test, and then they forgot about him. But his perception of Korean society and how people should be was way different than tradition. And one of the let's say with women's liberation or women's rights, so to speak. So my great grandfather died when my harabaji was 10. So his mom became a single mom, and so she was an outsider. You lost all your social position, and so I think because he loved her, he had the ability to see that was wrong, and so her life wasn't wasted. She still had value. But the other thing for him, he's not Yangban. He was born on Todong Island in the Taedong River. And they were farmers and sheep herders. So, he comes from normal Minjuk, stock. And so I don't think people realize that. And another reason, a lot of people have used him, for their own self-promotions. And so they turned Dosan's identity into something that supported them other than what it really was. But, Dosan came to Seoul when he was 16 and was walking around the streets, and a minister named F.S. Miller from the Kusei Hakdong, which was Underwood School, which later became Yonsei, invited him into what was called an orphanage, so to speak, but I think it was just a school for a Christian school, a Presbyterian school. So, losing his father, and then the war between China and Japan. And Pyongyang really took, damaging hits, and women were being accosted and, killed. And then all of the the traditional monuments that were being destroyed. And so, he goes, what's wrong with our country? We don't have any kind of backbone of nationalism, or we don't have our own army. These two foreign countries are fighting, and we can't stop them. So, he realized that the monarchy was not good, and that this ideals of democracy and Christianity were giving him a different perspective on life. And so his first attempts were to change the way Korean people were themselves, And so that's the elementary 101. But just an unusual person, ahead of his time. And even at the Dosan Park, the Memorial Hall isn't really super informative. It's just kind of cookie cutter stuff that everybody knows.
You mentioned the Taedong River, so he born and grew up in what is now North Korea.
Yes.
That's around Pyongyang.
Yes.
The Chinese-Japanese War, which basically took place on Korean soil. People get this confused, but the war between China and Japan was 1895.
Exactly.
What kind of, when was he growing up? When was his age?
He was born 1878.
Okay.
So he was a 16-year-old impressive teenager, watching that. And then the other thing, he came in 1894. The other thing that he was here for was the assassination of Queen Min. And he had started to pick up on her philosophy, and one of the things he was really pushing is not to sell your land to the Japanese, and especially coastal land. But what's interesting, and I said, the Black Dragon Society. So it's
sounds cool.
but an underground kind of group from Japan.
Yeah,
and really evil people. And they even had Black Dragon spies in America in World War II. But they were here doing land surveys, and already in the 1895, the Japanese were figuring out which land they wanted. And so there's, Dosan saw that, and then the assassination of Queen Min. So all these little things, he was kind of a person that had critical thinking and independent thinking that early.
How did he get educated, and when did he take the name Dosan? Because you said he wasn't Yangban, so it would have been hard to get an education. I would imagine daily life, it wasn't all the hagwons and internet lectures and things we see today then. So how did he get all of this?
It was the Kusei Hakdang, because they had a format for education that was similar to what the Trivium, and so instead of just Chinese classics and that Chinese history, they were teaching science and geography and, a pretty intensive, math and just different things that broadened people's minds that were there. Do you know Kim Kyu-sik?
Yeah, he's part of the independence movement, isn't he?
Right.
Yeah.
So when Dosan got to Kusei Hakdang, it's kind of Underwood adopted Kim Kyu-sik. His name was Johan, but he adopted him so he could treat him medically. He had parents, he still has a family. So he was 14 and Dosan was 16. So those guys met there, and for the rest of, Kim Kyu-sik lived a long time. So for the rest of the independence movement, they worked together. And so, in the Presbyterian mission reports, they called Dosan this kid from Pyongyang that had more zeal than anybody else. And so there was just, he was just a special kid, and I think that, he became one of the first Christians. But he also, like my mom would say when, in LA when he was there, that he would meditate and start shaking. He would get that deep into meditation. And then some of his quotes and sayings have a touch of Mencius and some Confucius. So, Dosan was a universal person. He wanted to take a little bit of everything. And literally, he wanted Koreans to become the prime great citizens of the world. It's not exactly that, but with the way K-pop and K-pop demon hunters and, Samsung phones, Hanguk Tiger, Korea is really
it's hot.
Yeah. But
when did he take the name Dosan? What does it mean?
So Dosan means island mountain. And so when he left here, and some people say he named himself after Kumgang's son. They come up with these crazy, but he's my grandfather. I know this story better than anybody. So when he left here, he was already like having speeches against the kingdom and the monarchy and taxes, and the missionaries wanted him out because he was bringing too much heat. And so people got together, got him money. My grandmother was in love with him, but not married yet. So they got married at Severance Hospital just like a couple days before they got on the boat. And so when he left to go to America, they went to Hawaii first. And when he saw Hawaii rise up out of the ocean, he got this, spiritual feeling that I'm in a sea of social upheaval. And I'm like an island. I'm one of the few people that are doing this. There was other people, like even like Yoon Ji-ho and So Jae-pil and all, those people from the Kapsan coup. There was this group of democratic thinking people, but he also realized he had to be strong and rise up like a mountain to do what he planned to do. And, creative thinking guy, that's what he captured as his pen name.
I never knew that. It's fantastic. It must have been very hard to speak against a monarchy when you're in that monarchy. It's very easy to, and even today in democracies, it's easy to speak critically against your government, but to do it at that time, must have been very difficult, mustn't it? Or it must have.
Well,
Am I misunderstanding?
It was difficult for people that didn't have the conviction, and he was a smart guy, and he just knew that, like learning about the Meiji Reform and then, learning about the Japanese, and, he had an idea of what they were up to before a lot of other people. But I think, the real probably driving force is he's probably one of the truest patriots that love Korea more than anybody. So I think he knew that somebody had to make a sacrifice, because he literally was giving speeches against the governor and the monarchy, mostly about taxes. So he was already like, there's something called the Manmun. It's some kind of a 10,000 man assembly, and they were all people that were wanting democracy. And there's another patriot named Pak Yong-man, and so Pak Yong-man was in one of his audiences and became another great patriot. But there's in other years in speeches when the Japanese spies were in the crowd, Kenari.
The Black Dragons.
Yeah, the Black Dragons, and the Kenari is a flower, right? So the word K is dog.
Yes.
So he would start talking about Kenari when there was a Japanese spy in the crowd. So he has all these symbolisms and things. But yeah, so Dosan, he chose that name and then went on to the mainland and went to Canada first, Seattle, then ended up in San Francisco. And October 14th, 1902, he got off the boat in San Francisco with my grandmother.
This is a really stupid question. At that time, when they were arguing for the future of the country, did they call Korea Korea? Did they call it Joseon? Did they call it Urinara? I mean, Korea feels very modern to me as a linguistic term.
Well, part of the term, it's Joseon or Korea with a C. Because there's that, story that the Japanese,
the Olympics,
because K, became after J.
Yeah.
But I when we talk about him at home, when the family was there, I'm one of the few left. It was always nara il. Your harabaji was doing nara il. And so, but we called it Korea.
Country work.
Yeah.
Nara il.
Yeah.
And so he would, before he went to America, he found Christianity.
Yes, at Kusei Hakdong. It was and he had a hard time converting, but there was a early person in Piltae-un who was another patriot. Convinced him that Christianity was the way to go. But I went to a Catholic military academy. I studied religion. I'm not that bound to the Bible, but because they translated the Bible into Hangul, it more so than the Book of God, it became the Book of Change, where some of the ideals of how you should be honest or treat your neighbor and those kinds of things that were being explained in the Bible was the way that Dosan understood that Koreans should change. And then in a more specific Christian influence was John Nevius.
Okay.
There's a Nevius method, and it was a Presbyterian. The Presbyterian Church, their governing is really like a government. It's really democratic. There's all kinds of levels and rules and everything. So the Presbyterians were trying to fight the Catholic Church to get bigger and bigger numbers. And so they went to China. But the monarchy or the rule in China was strong and the people weren't revolting. And so there was no oppression. I mean, it was oppressed, but they didn't think that way. So when John Nevius came here, because of what the Japanese were doing to the Koreans, his way fit in. But one of the most important things what taught Dosan about finance and economy was John Nevius said, you can only work on donations for so long. You have to develop an economic element to expand the congregation, and that was selling the Bible. So he got the idea of business and that kinds of things too. But he maintained like in his home in Pyongyang later, building like rock walls and things that were more like maybe shamanistic than totally Christian. But he really wanted to use every facet of some kind of societal advancement to make Korea better.
That sounds very Korean. One of my favorite expressions is Koreans are Confucian by day. They're Taoist at night. They go to shamans when they got a problem, and they go to church when they need somebody or something like that. It's very pragmatic.
Exactly. Because one day I was in Nakseongdae, getting onto the subway, and it was Sunday, and there was two couples, dressed up in Western suits, and they were fighting each other across the street. And then the guy ran and got his car, and from the rearview mirror there were the Buddhist beads hanging, and on the back dash was the dried fruit, and they had Bibles in their hands. So just like they're covering all their bases.
Yeah. But, it's Korean, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Spicy question: how did Korea fall to Japan in the Dosan interpretation or your interpretation?
Well, they Chinilpa. I mean, they were traders that sold out for money, basically. And he really thought that was just the worst thing possible you could do, as a Korean. And so just the way they were being treated physically and domineering, but he realized that the reason it happened because of education. That common people didn't have, enough education or didn't think critically. So he also had this, when he met Ito, they had a private meeting. They wanted Dosan to take over as a puppet leader of the country.
Ito Hirobumi.
Yeah, Ito Hirobumi. I think he was the resident general. And this meeting took place in 1907. But Dosan said, look, if you came as our neighbor and wanted to help us, it'd be different. But you came as our enemy, and you're trying to take over our country. This is our country. So he had just said adamant, no, I'm not going to work with you. We're going to... Basically, after that meeting, he went to the Shinminhei and declared war on Japan. So, so if you go back to this pacifist, education, religious person, he had those characteristics. But on the other half, he was, started the Independence Army.
Can you say something about the Shinminhei?
The Shinminhei is real interesting because it means New People's Association. And so there was a group of Korean patriots on the sugar plantations in Hawaii, and this is like August 7th, 1903, actually started the Shinminhei. And what people don't understand here is they thought the Shinminhei started here in 1907. But the people from Hawaii came to California and they worked together. And so they were called the Shin Koryo-hei, which meant a new Korea. And Dosan said, no, we don't need a new country. We need new people. And so the Shinminhei was a secret organization when it first started out. Yanggi-tak and Shin Chae-ho and Kim Gu, all these, common, well-known patriots were part of that organization. And so it started here, I think, like in January of 1907. and it was a secret. You know, it was based on the similar communication of the Freemasons. And so not everybody knew who everybody was. But the Shinmin, like this previous president of the Independence Hall, I think his name is Kim Hyung-suk or something like, he just got fired. And he was saying how, you know, we should be thankful to the Japanese for modernizing Korea. But, you know, the Shinmin started the first public joint stockholding company called the Masandang Chagihuesa in Pyongyang because the coal burned hotter there, so the Celadon was better. Started the first chain called the Eguk bookstores and schools, Taesung Hakyo, Osan, and other businesses trying to develop the future foundation for Korea to build on. It's like, you know, one of Tosan's quotes is, you can't put a roof on before you have a good foundation. And the other one is, you can be the best architect, but if you don't have good lumber, whatever you're building's not going to come out right. So he was building a nation. And then the Japanese, that's where the 105-man incident comes from.
What's that?
The 105 Shinminhei people were arrested by the Japanese and put in jail.
When was this?
1911 through 1913. And they were going to kill them all. But, you know, somehow, some way, people got out, because they knew if that happened, it was going to really rev up some more stuff. And oddly enough, after 1910, the annexation, you know, nobody can leave, you know, no passports, you know, no Korean nothing. And that group from Taesung Hakyo, which that school was a military style school, and they were training assassins there. And so, like, people say, oh, how do you know that? Page 289, volume 5, Tosan Complete Works. It's a translation of interrogation of a provisional government person named Cha Isok, and he explains that right there. So we got to translate it from Korean to English, you know, Japanese to Korean. And so there are these proofs, but people don't really want to admit to them. So this guy, Reverend David Lee in San Francisco, went to William Bryant, who was the Secretary of State. I think he was over the Scopes monkey trial later and other things. And he got them political asylum. Wow. So it was the first case in the United States of Koreans getting political asylum.
It never occurred to me that people wouldn't have been able to leave after the complete annexation in 1910, that would have been sort of closed society now.
Yeah, and
belonged to us.
In 1905, there was a group of Koreans that were sold to Mexico as slaves. The king got a private bank account from a British guy and a Japanese guy. And there's a whole story there. But
Korea sold slaves to Mexico in 1905.
Yeah. And so these things that happen in history that aren't really, you know, told well, don't explain the whole history where people can appreciate it more. And so Tosan actually went there later to visit these people. But there was one guy from this group in Mexico, and they were under a 4-year contract. And so he escaped and he walked from Mexico to to California to find Tosan. But the thing there, you know, after 1910, these guys' contract is over in 1909. They become like basically free. But in 1910, they don't have a passport. They can't come to America. They can't go anywhere. So all these political complications. But the one thing, I guess, the underlying thing is these people's patriotism to free Korea from Japan was so strong that they went through these. You know, you talk about life, you know, in a Henneken plant. It's just absolutely. He lied to him saying it was like Hawaii. The immigration to Hawaii wasn't immigration. They got sold as slaves too, because it was the Hawaiian sugar plantation owners that had annexed Hawaii from the native monarchy, you know, and so these people were just out for money. And there's so many stories about these peoples. This guy, David Deschler, was in charge of labor at some gold mine, Kunsan gold mine or something like that. And so he connected with them, but he was a Freemason. And then Samuel Moffett he was a Freemason.
He was
So
the big guy up in Pyongyang, wasn't
exactly.
he, doing the churches there?
Yeah, so when you look and people, the Hanyang Lodge here with the Freemasons is over 100 years old. So I don't know why it's not uh, more of a popular part of Korean history but Freemasons are a secret society. So Tosan modeled things after the Freemasons, and but losing your citizenship, that's when they really got it. We've lost our country. So
it's interesting. So Freemasons have an influence, you think, in Korea, in the independence movement, in the
yes.
things that have happened.
Yeah. And there's another person in Riverside where this controversy of the first Koreatown and all this other baloney is, but the head of that area at this Pachapa camp, he was a Freemason.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, there's got to be some, reason. The reasons haven't really been spelled out completely, but with Tosan, they're pretty clear. But somehow the Freemasons have a lot to do with the role of history here.
I grew up with parents going to Mason event. I remember them going
really?
out. Yeah. I've been to one here. I got invited to one here, to a lodge. Come in and get drunk with us and have dinner and all of this. And I was like, I'll do anything once, I'm a curious person. I'm
sure.
like, you
sure,
got wine,
why not?
right?
Yeah, especially here.
I go and have a drink and see what's going on. It was all foreigners.
Oh yeah,
predominantly. When I went to
There's
the one.
There's very
here.
few Korean Freemasons. There's a few in the United States, in L.A.
It just seemed to destroy what illusion. I mean, I think of, what is it, Dan Brown and Da Vinci Codes and Illuminatis and all of these kind of secretive handshakes. And there's a bit of that ritual going on. But when I went there, it's just like, it's you guys. Hi.
Yeah.
It's like seeing behind the Wizard of Oz curtain for me personally.
In some ways, that's kind of like the Hung Sadan today. That's another story.
So, Ahn Chang-ho, Dosan, he goes to the United States, 1903? Is it around
1902.
1902. Let's do that because we're doing the independence movement, but there's also that Korean American. He goes to the States and then comes back, doesn't he?
Yes.
Let's talk about going to the States and what that does, please.
So to go to the States to begin with, he's going to get educated to come back and reform the education system here. So he enrolls in elementary school, and I don't know, let's see, 1878, 1902. He's 24. And he's in the second grade, and people were not saying, "What's this problem here?" So they threw him out. And at the time too, it was the heavy anti-Asian. They had segregated all the Asians from school. So you had to go to these specific Asian. They weren't real big. But what was funny was the Japanese finagled their way through Theodore Roosevelt to get taken out. So it was just the Chinese and Koreans. And so that's what he went to get an education. And then there's the story where he finds two ginseng merchants fighting in the streets, and all the Americans are looking at him laughing, and they're wearing the traditional white clothing. But that was one thing. Before Tosan left, he took on Western wear. Western clothing, to give the rest of the world the impression that the Koreans had the ability to modernize and become an independent sovereign nation.
This is a stupid question. Did he have a mustache?
No, not in the beginning.
Because I always picture the people when the reformers, they have the suit, the short hair, they cut the sangtu, the top knot, take off the white hanbok, and
He had a real thin mustache at Kusei Hakdan when he was a teaching assistant. But then before he left, he shaved his top knot, wore Western suits, and that's how he left. And I think the mustache came in 1911, 1912, because there's this professor that makes up all these stories. And so he'll have a story of Tosan in 1912 saying it's 1905. And when you look at Tosan in 1905, there are plenty of pictures. No mustache at all. So there's certain things in history that Koreans don't try to follow logically, or the sense of it. So he takes these ginseng merchants, and not only does he calm them down, he creates a co-op so they can sell, equally and effectively, because he wants the whole community to advance. And the thing with the ginseng was the Chinese railway workers and other laborers preferred Korean ginseng over any other ginseng. But did you ever look into the American ginseng?
I'm not sure I've ever had it. We get all the ginseng over here.
Yeah, so
gives you stamina.
Yeah,
they tell me every time they give it to me. It makes your belly warm as well. Sorry, when you have the Hong salmon, they'll say,
if you have the flu
and
you have body temperature, you shouldn't take ginseng because it raises your body temperature. But what it was the Americans had ginseng and they were selling it to China because it was really powerful, but they picked it all.
Okay.
And so they knew that the Koreans had the ability to grow it. So this is the first, technology battle or it's the late 1700s. So some Americans got some Koreans to go to America and teach them how to grow it. And so this technology has changed, just battle over, so there's these little things that people don't know. I have a record of a ginseng salesman at the Chicago Stock Exchange in late 1800s or whatever, some kind of trade thing.
Yeah.
So that's just a trivial story. But so he created this co-op, and then he realized that the Koreans that were there, the students and merchants, should develop a community. And so he started what was called the Chinmoke, was just kind of a social organization. And then that also started a church meeting. And
Chin being friendly. What was the second one?
Chinmoke, Friendship Association.
Okay.
So he also had a activity called Cleaner Homes, Hands, and Habits, where he had Koreans, clean themselves up, put curtains in their windows, not going outside smoking or being, so people dispute that there was a community in San Francisco, but I'm going like, if he's making a co-op, he's teaching people how to clean their homes, and the landlords who saw this improvement reduced the rent.
Nice.
So there was all these strange things that he did to build communities, to build friendships, and it was all to make Koreans stronger as a group. And so then he went to Riverside, California. There was already Koreans there doing orange, because at that time the orange picking became like gold mining. It was huge. And so these people were working there, and he went down there and helped them organize. And do you know Nabisco? Nabisco is an American big national biscuit company.
Okay.
So it was huge, like crackers, like or like
Kellogg's crackers, McVitie's.
Yeah. Or like it'd be like what is it?
Ritz.
Choco pie or
yeah.
So Lotte or whoever makes, so it'd be that kind of company. That guy owned the orchard because he was from the East Coast, but the health of Southern California and making money. So he organized a group down there, and then in San Francisco, it became the Kongnapyope, which was the first political organization. And in the meantime, there's organizations developing in Hawaii because there's thousands of people going there, to work in the plantation, where there's less than 1,000 people in the mainland for a long, long time. And then he came back for the Shinminhae, back to Korea in 1907. So he was sent back because of the protected agreement, so they knew that Korea was slipping away. And so in 1907, when he met Ito and they had them, he knew that they were going to get annexed. So that's why he declared war. And the other controversy is he wrote the Eguka.
He ordered the hit on Hirobumi and was arrested for that?
Yeah. Because Ahn Chung-gun met him, and Ahn Chung-gun was a special agent for the Shinminhae. And Ahn Chung-gun was a guerrilla warfare guy, also a teacher, and also a great calligrapher.
Christian as well, wasn't he?
Yes, or Catholic.
Same thing. In my wheelhouse, yeah.
Yeah, his mother's name was Maria. I mean, the Maria.
That's pretty Catholic.
Yeah. And so Yi Tong-hui, who's another patriot, and Dosan had made this independence army and they were trying to figure out how to really put together an army. And so they met with Ahn Chang-ho in Vladivostok with a few other patriots, and suggested to him that he should shoot Ito, because he was already carrying on this kind of, I don't know if you call it anarchist, but guerrilla warfare. And it's like, yeah, you got to sacrifice yourself. You got to get rid of this guy, because it's going to be, the worse the more things get. But I think it might have been worse that they killed him, because the next guy that came in was an army general. And so he became the resident general, and that really changed things. But yeah, and so this Durham White Stevens guy, there's a book by Carol Cameron Shaw called The Foreign Influence on the Destruction of Korean Independence. And it's based on actually a lot of letters. I think some went to Britain, to the government there, explaining what was going on. And this guy, Edward Vernon Morgan, and this guy, he's a Japanese guy, but they're both alumni from Harvard. And they invented or implemented the counterfeit nickels that collapsed the Bank of Korea so the Daiichi Bank could take over. This is a Harvard alumni. Harvard's been pro-Japanese forever. I got in a fight with them. I still am.
So they invented a fake currency to take down the Korean bank and promote the Japanese one, which would allow the annexation of Korea. Yeah,
part of that. It all was, building up to that. And so, Dosan just said, this guy, Durham White Stevens, was working for the Japanese government, and they assigned him as a liaison to the Korean government, the monarchy at the time. And so he was giving speeches about how stupid Koreans were and that they couldn't run their own country. They were ignorant. And so Dosan said, take this guy out. 'cause in those days, there's no cell phones and stuff. So the information is secret. It comes by wire, and it's just not popular, But the two, one guy from his group, the Kongnam Pyope, and another guy from a group called the Tedon Pogoke got together and, basically shot him.
What happens with the Provisional Government in Shanghai and Samuel Undong in 1919?
So
is he a part of that?
So leading up to that, there's a group called the Kungminhae, or the Korean National Association, which develops over this trial for Durham White Stevens. The Koreans in Hawaii and the Koreans in San Francisco, really, we got to pull together to get a legal work and protect this guy. So they made this group while Tosan's there. So he comes back, and this is the forerunner of the Korean Provisional Government. Because these guys, like this Henry Chung Hang Kyung, and a guy named Jacob Dunn and Park Young-man, they're all studying democracy. They're going to Nebraska, going to Princeton, and they're getting masters and doctors. And so they're studying this Constitution. So the Constitution for the KNA is the basic platform for the Constitution today. And so Tosan's running this group, and in 1918, they're concentrating on going to the Paris Peace Conferences and some other stuff. And then the March 1st thing happens. And so in America, in Philadelphia, in April, after they heard about March 1st, they had a parade, and it was a march from a theater to the Liberty Bell. And it was a group of really brilliant, young Korean political activists from all over the United States and some from Mexico. So all I'm saying is this coalition, and so they decided Dosan should go to Shanghai. And so that's when he shows up. And he's like the first main patriot to show up. But Kim Kyu-shik was already there. Kim Kyu-shik went, and he went as a socialist. So at this group of political thinkers, you have socialists, people with democratic ideals, people that are connected, like Lee Tong-hwee's connected to Lenin. And so there are three different governments. There's the Seoul government, the Shanghai government, and I forget what the third one was. But he, before, had this persona and charisma to get people to work together.
Mm.
So he had all these 3 different provisional governments combined to the Shanghai. And so then later on, other patriots showed up and they just started fighting. So for 2 years, Tosan tried to keep these people together. They were doing a lot of important work, but finally he says, I can't do this. So he a lot of people don't realize he left in 1921. And he stayed in China. But then in 1924, he came back to America. But when Syngman Rhee showed up, everybody came before Syngman Rhee. Syngman Rhee did. He came last, and he was supposed to be prime minister. But he changed his position to president because he wanted to be on the same level as the president of the United States, which was a joke.
Mm-hmm.
But he actually caused so much trouble, and the people at the museum didn't believe me. But I have these documents, and so specifically it's from 1925. They wanted to kill him, and so he knew that. And so when my grandfather came back to America in 1924, Syngman Rhee had some people make up these lies that he was a Bolshevik, and he went to jail in America for being that. But so the provisional government starts.
Sorry, Dosan went to jail for being a Bolshevik.
Yeah, in 1920.
In the States.
In the States, yeah. And it was just total fabrication. But, Syngman Rhee had the connections to the American government. He went to Princeton. He was a puppet of Woodrow Wilson. And, there's so much of this, underlying stuff that the Korean government doesn't want to teach. They want this guy to be a hero. But when President Yoon tried to make a memorial hall, I mean, it went over like a lead balloon. But the independence movement was, started with the March 1st, and that was the thing. And actually, the March 1st, I mean, how do you think it started?
It's a few days after Gojong's death, isn't it? And it was a funeral procession that turned into something else. And there was one that took place in Japan a few days before that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There was a reading in Japan, and then there was Gojong's funeral, and
So actually, it starts in Shanghai.
Okay.
Kim Kyu-shik starts it. It goes from Shanghai to Manchuria, from Manchuria to Tokyo. And one of the kids that we were with at dinner, his great-grandfather was the head of the Waseda Korean Students Association at the time. They're the ones that had the thing that you're talking about. They're the ones that finalized the March 1st document. And Lee Kwang-soo was one of the ones who really wrote it over. And I think the Chinilpa thing is over-exaggerated. There's reasons for it. So anyway, so these 2 women, Cha Kyung-shin and Maria Kim, were students there. And the Japanese thought that no women would be part of any kind of independence movement. They smuggled the actual declaration days before in their kimonos back to here.
Nice.
Yeah. So my grandfather had women as couriers for that very reason. There's a great book about a patriot named Cha Kyung-shin called Pumpkin Flower and Patriotism.
Pumpkin Flower and Patriot,
Hobak. Yeah. So what the deal was is the Japanese threw her into a fire because they knew she was a courier. And she got out, threw it back in, and then finally she laid in there like she was dead. And Cha Kyung-shin, her daughter, was there. And so she pulled her out of the fire and put this Hobak salve on her to save her. And then when she went to Shanghai to China, grandfather was a doctor at a clinic and treated her there. But at the end of the Imshi Chongguk Kinyo, they don't even know who she is. But it's a great story. It's in a book, so.
You've mentioned the word Chinilpa a couple of times, which is sort of Japanese sympathizer or traitors or people working with the Japanese, right?
I call them traitors.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of the literal translation, but I'm going to ask you a question. You might slap me for this. Because he went to jail for being a Bolshevik, did he ever have the Chinilpa label attributed to him at any point? I'm sorry for asking you that.
No, it's fine. No. He's been accused of other things, but not of being a Japanese, because everybody knew he turned down Ito. And actually he turned him down twice, but other people that he worked with became Chinilpa. And that's part of the reason for the Hungsanan, all of a sudden, who do I trust? So I have to build this network to develop people that I can really trust to fulfill the freedom of Korea. But the Chinilpa thing is, like, today, fighting some of the stuff that they do, I still feel like I'm fighting Tosan's fight against Japanese influence. You know, like the president of the Independence Hall. You know, I mean, and with the Syngman Rhee Memorial Hall, that guy should have been one of the first guys to say, "Hey, the proof that we have in here that this isn't right." You know, because I mean, I hope nobody whacks your show, but Syngman Rhee was a pedophile.
It's the first time I've heard that. I've heard he was many things. Communist, I've heard from David Fields. He was a pedophile.
There's a woman named Nori Kim who was from Hawaii, who was young and was traveling with him, and he got arrested for taking a minor across state lines. And then they had a child out of wedlock who I met. Her name was Winifred, and she lived in Hawaii. And people know this story, but they won't. Yeah, there's so many stories about him that they won't publish because he's quote unquote the first president, you know. But yeah, it's controversial. But if anybody says anything, I mean, there's legitimate proof, you know. So, but it's, you know, people just don't want to say it. But he was horrible, you know, and even getting toppled in the 60s. A lot of the people that were responsible for toppling were the Hun Sen, young students, you know. But yeah, it as wild as some of this stuff sounds, Korean history is so, I mean, interesting, you know.
When you were describing it, I couldn't help but think of the idea that if you put two Koreans in a room, they'll create three political parties. My party, your party, and Uri party, or something like that. Like, to get Koreans on the same side is very, very difficult. They're very, and I don't say this, my politics professors would teach me this, and taxi drivers will say this to me, that one of the big, when Koreans do things well is when they're united, but one of the biggest challenges is to get Korean people on the same page or singing from the same sheet. And
Tosan felt the exact same way, you know, unifying the community, you know, having a common goal. You know, it in the America for a while, everybody's common goal was to defeat Japan to get freedom. But then as time went, that community is so fractured. And, you know, you'll have somebody at a meeting and they don't like what somebody said. They'll go start a new organization. And, you know, it defeats the purpose of Korean organizations because when, you know, let's say the funding pie, the more organizations you have, the thinner the pie slice is, and then the more chances of corruption are. And so, you know, it's ridiculous at what people do. You know?
And the smaller you are in relation to whatever you're fighting, if you're divided that way. After 1919, you said 1924, he went to Shanghai, to the States?
From Shanghai. He went
from
to
Shanghai
the
to the States. It was 1937, he was arrested here?
Oh,
so how do we get from 1924 to 1937?
So arrest-wise, he was in Sodium prison at least 6 different times. He was in Daejeon Kamok for 3 years. That's one thing that people just don't realize, how many times he's been arrested. So in 1926, because of the Bolshevik accusation, his visa expires. And so he had a Chinese visa, because when he was in Shanghai, he became a naturalized Chinese citizen to try to keep out of the yoke of the Japanese.
That's quite spicy. Do people use that against him, that he had a Chinese?
No, because they knew it was for the independence movement. You know, so you know
or because it would have been impossible to have a Korean one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because they didn't exist.
Yeah. It's better to have a Chinese than a Japanese one.
Exactly. You know, they wasn't going to get a Japanese one.
Yeah.
But so he gets deported. You know, from the States, he leaves L.A. and he goes to Hawaii, and because Hawaii is Syngman Rhee territory, and they don't like the Korean National Association branch, which is there, you know, as soon as they got there, they said, "This guy's a Bolshevik, get him out of here," and so they shipped him out. And so he came back to China, and what he felt that was important was to develop a political party. You know, and that was part of the independence movement, had no structure to it as a political unit. And so from 1927, he tried to find schools and also villages where they could start to develop a community, get in industry. So when Korea got its freedom, they would have people that were experienced in commerce or business or education. And he also had companies in the United States that had stockholding. So he had some really good people. And Henry Chung is one of these guys because he was a CPA and understood finance. If you look at his financial reports, they're impeccable.
Did Dosan live rich?
No.
It's a question. I mean, but
A lot of
traveling
people
around
think so. That's a great question. Don't get me wrong. They were migrant farm workers.
I saw the photo of him on an orange farm. I think it might have been in your. I like that one.
But it's a great picture. Yeah. But the thing about that picture is, so when he's coming back through Berlin in 1911, he's sick because he was in jail for the Ahn Chang-ho assassination. He had tuberculosis, cirrhosis of the lungs, pleurisy. And so that picture is a advertisement for the Shinhan Minbo to get workers to come to work for the Kongnap Pyope or that labor agency.
Yeah.
Because, they talk about money being donated, but Dosan developed a tax system. And so what you got as a laborer was room and board, your laundry, your food cooked, and you got pay, but part of that pay went to the independence movement. But one of the things that's really overlooked,
it's like a tithe.
Yeah,
it's kind of Christian, isn't it? 10%.
Yeah, yeah, and it's probably somewhat of the Nevius method. Thinking about growing the congregation, but the congregation is the Korean independence movement. The women. My grandmother was picking grapes, picking tomatoes, and at the same time sewing clothes, cooking for the men. So there's this group of Korean women that were really a major part of, unsung heroes, the backbone of that community. I remember these ladies, when I was a little kid, and they were tough. So, this whole was always building, trying to develop. So in 1927, he's in China trying to make this party, trying to find the Seimal, the village movement. He started that, and I think Pak Chung Hee kind of kidnapped it.
He spoke Chinese, I guess? English, Korean?
Yeah, probably spoke Chinese better than English. But people say he couldn't speak English, but he did speak English, not very well. But he had a group of translators around him, like this Reverend David Lee guy.
Yeah,
he wrote English grammar, English as well as any, native.
Are there any recordings of Dosan speaking?
No, not that I've ever heard. And recently,
that's quite sad.
Group of really, because he was known as a great orator with a really deep voice, and this is what
I guess he didn't smoke, did he, or drink?
He smoked like a chimney.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, a group of Korean researchers came to try to find out what he did wrong.
Yeah,
but it was smoking. Because he was like, my mom and my sister said that he might have been bipolar, because he's always taking chances.
Yeah.
But he was allergic to alcohol. So the minute alcohol touched his lips, he would turn red.
That's pretty Korean.
Yeah.
Smoke a lot and turn red when you drink. Yeah.
But, he really didn't have any vices. And there's a story when he was in Shanghai that this lady of the night came in and wanted to sleep with him or whatever, and he said something patriotic to her and said, you take that candle and go back out in the room and keep the light on for independence and get out of here. But he was handsome. So what this two researchers did, I think last year, it was on YouTube. They took a picture of him from Sodium Prison, one of his prison card pictures. And so by modeling that physical look of Dosan, they recreated his voice.
Nice.
And it was just like this squeaky, just like, oh my God.
It's not what you want, is it?
No, it's like, have they started teaching logic here? I mean, there's no real, as long as I have, there's no real logic courses. Because the logical thing to be Philip Ahn, the movie actor, who has tons of recordings, my voice, Philip's voice, all the boys were like Dosan's voice. Deep, loud, strong, not this, I'm an independence movement fighter. My neck is about 2 inches wide and that's my voice. And so
That is kind of subconsciously what people sometimes associate with that generation, though, isn't it?
yeah.
Hello and welcome to the news. And we put on that thing.
Yeah, it's the wrong persona. But
if they do virtual AI of him, of Dosan, and things like that.
Yeah, they're doing it, and
how
it
do
was
you feel
funny
when you see
because
that?
I like some of it because last year on August 15th, I went to Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors Soccer.
Okay. Yeah.
And they
Football.
had AI of him, which was great. It could have been a little better, but I kicked the first kick and I sang the national anthem.
Oh, man.
And behind me is Dosan on the AI screen.
Yeah.
And, for me at that time, there's a picture of me and you can see him behind me and I'm waving and he's, it's the closest I've ever been, except when we dug him up in Mangwari.
You dug him up.
Yeah, the friend of mine's relative was the main. I don't know what but it was real scientific. I have a degree in anthropology and a degree in geography, so I'm interested in this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
When my uncle saw it, just saw his bones, I grabbed him because he was fainting and falling into the grave. But they took him, because he was in a pine box. And it rotted, so they put him back together.
Was it in a mound or two? Can you just say what it looked like?
Yeah, he was in a mound.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Japanese put him up there because it was far away at the time, and nobody would go up there. And there was a old gravestone that was written by a guy, Osejang, who's a famous writer at the time, and they put in a new one, and somehow they lost the old one. I'm just kind of like, it's so little crazy things. But yeah, that's the only time I ever saw him. And
it's quite dark, though, isn't
yeah,
it? Like,
but
how old were you at the time when that
18.
happened? Oh my God!
But I had a camera with me, and just once my uncle was stable and everyone was, I was firing pictures of him. So I've got this whole collection of bone by bone and the dema, the hemp wrapping, and so
smoke some of that. Was there anything placed in the coffin with him, or was there something around, or was it just bones?
No, it was just the interesting things were that his shirt abalone buttons, and so the guy gave him to my mom, and she gave him back. And after the thing, I'm going, Mom, where's the buttons? Oh, I gave them back. I'm like, what? But there was nothing there. They wanted to keep him, disassociated, and
Where is he now? That's a stupid question.
Now, no, not a stupid question. So my uncle and a few other people really campaigned to have him a park. Dosan Park. And so that started in 1970, 71. And by 73, it was ready. And so when I came to Korea for the first time on his birthday in November of 1973 with the long hair, meeting Chung Hee, and, that's when they moved the bodies. And we bought my grandmother back from America. And she had come back in 1963. She left in 1902, the only time she ever came back. And then when we brought her back, she still had her Korean passport. And so, a lot of people don't understand, but she's buried there. But I've been fighting with them because they let the grave kind of go. It's only square blocks and stuff, but all the grout is gone. That's coming away. They let the moss grow on it. I built houses in construction, and I know how easy it is to, you got to stay on it. And to me, this guy's the number one patriot, and and it's in Gangnam. It's the Gangnam City runs it. They have the most money of any city, and and so like when people ask me, and I go, yeah, this isn't right. It's like with Kim Gu. Kim Gu's everything to Koreans. Dosan got him out of jail when he met Ito. Dosan worked with him. If you look at all the old pictures, and that the central figure in the picture is the key guy, Dosan's in the middle. Kim Gu's way out on the end because he's a security guard. Don't get me wrong. He's a great patriot. He's important. But the way they have the historical hierarchy is a little askew. Not because he's my grandfather, but anybody that really studied him, but they've censored a lot of his stuff. Like An Byung-uk was a great philosopher. He went to jail. Luke Im Jin Chang was tortured by Chen Duan and killed for teaching Tosan's philosophy. So there's these heavy, because like, I forget what year it was, but I went to Atlanta to the Civil Rights Walk of Fame, and they inducted him there. And they didn't want him, the Hung Sedan and Dosan Kim, they didn't want him there because they're racist against black people. And some of these black people knew more about Tosan than some of these quote-unquote Korean scholars. And so I went and they interred him there, and so those kind of civil rights, and even the Chinmoke and that labor agency, Tosan would represent those laborers to make sure they got paid. So there's all these kind of, and plus they call him a Yangbun, but he's a sheep herder. He's just a normal person. So I don't know why but now it's changing because the younger people that I see that surfers and then social media and the exposure of other histories and the guts of people to make shibby or even taxi driver. It's changing their quest for truth, and identity and heritage.
I think what you say about social media is very interesting because we have the big blockbuster movies. You're correct, but there's a lot of people. Some do it well, some do it very well, some don't do it well, but they go online and they share stories about Korean history and Korean American history, and they make reels and they bring to light these things in 5 minutes or a few minutes and they do it from their own personal perspective by reading the history, but saying it in a way that sometimes NBC or KBS or things, they have to make an hour-long documentary.
Right.
But this way, I think there is more information coming out. Is Tosan associated with the left or the right these days in history textbooks? Because it's a weird question, but the right love Lee Seung-man.
Oh, yeah.
The left love Kim Dae-jung. And these are president. Is there a political side to him or in the current thing?
Yeah, and it's misconceived. I was here the night of martial law.
2024, the recent one.
Yeah,
which one?
Yeah, which one?
That's so Korean, isn't it?
Just the recent one. And with the demonstrations, and they're so well organized because when I lived here in the 90s, it was the pipe beating Cheryutan machine with the Darth Vader
the
gun.
toothpaste.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I did that. Always had toothpaste and a handkerchief. And
I'm British. I can never do that. Toothpaste? No.
So there is a big misconception because, when Pak Chung Hee made Dosan Park, my uncle was savvy, and he says, this is the only chance we're going to get probably, and so a lot of the leftists just automatically, assume that Dosan family was supporting Pak Chung Hee. And then there was a guy named Lee Kwang-nin, who was the president of one of the universities, small universities south of Seoul. He came to me one day when we were talking about history. He said, Philip, I have to apologize to you. I wasn't at the opening of Dosan Park because there were so many Chinapa there, like the prime minister and all these other, and there are, and there still are, there were, and there still are. And then the leftists try to use him for leverage, but it doesn't work. Like at one point, there was a leftist guy at the Hung Sedan who, oddly enough, came from the Blue House, but he was so far left that the Angibu, the CIA, put the Hung Sedan on the blacklist.
Oh, wow.
So they were tapping all the. But another interesting story is in the elections in the 90s when Kim Young-sam, Kim Dae-jung, all those.
Kim Jong-pil would have been.
Yeah. And even the comedian Lee Ju-il, he ran for president. But Chung Ji-young from Hyundai came. And so the Hung Sedan is supposed to be non-political. So I was there a couple days later. I came. Every phone, every electronic was Hyundai.
Wow.
But I think of the chaebols. I think Hyundai is the most Korean. The chaebol syndrome is a big problem in America. Because everybody follows the wealth of the chaebols here and their rule. So in America, people follow the richest people, and they like look at them like a mini chaebol.
Yeah.
So the way that they bow down to them, try to seek favor is really odd. But, in 3 or 4 years ago, I got interviewed by Vogue Korea. Oh, it was when Yoon and not for fashion, not for fashion.
You look good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But it was about the election. They
Yeah.
wanted some history. So they asked me what I thought about either candidate. It was E.J. Milling or Yoon. And I knew I had to squeak out of this one. So I went.
It's a hard question, though.
Yeah, I go.
At the time, it was.
Yeah, because I go, well, there seems to be an abuse of history by most presidents. And I go, the thing that whoever gets elected should be is they should be more like Dosan. And so that was, But Dosan had the ideals for political parties and, his character development, for Mushil, what was it? I can't even say him anyways. It's Musil, Chungji, Yeongnam, something I can't remember all four. But it's truth, being courage enough to abide by the truth, being loyal enough to the truth. And, so he wanted to change the character of the people based on truth because, in his, like, one of his quotes are like, lies and deceit are the enemy of my country. Or even when you're dreaming, you shouldn't lie, and one of the best ones as far as youth is discouragement of the youth is the death of the nation. And a lot of people don't realize that Dosan was a young guy when he was doing all this stuff, so he was fighting the old tradition and everything. But you look at the Hungsadan blueprint, you look at the independence movement, and these things are all written out. So he definitely left a legacy. And, unfortunately, people don't follow those completely. But
you have an archive of those, you were saying?
Yeah. And I've been, there's a big collection at the Tongnam Kinyongwan, but Independence Hall in Cheonan. I worked there for a while, but they just, the politics that they have just kind of squelches the real history. But the younger group over here at the Provisional Government Museum, and the good thing that they're focused on the provisional government and basically the development of democracy, where the Independence Hall is just a larger consortium of different values and ideas. But I have a lot of hope for this place. So I'm transferring things here. There's some things at the Dosan Memorial Foundation at the Dosan Park, my grandmother's sewing machine is there, and she's sewed Korean flags, Hungsadan flags, and so I donated some things that she sewed. And I'm just going, put them on the sewing machine so people can see what she did. They're in storage.
Sad, isn't it?
Yeah, because people want to see those things. So I think my time is now. My uncle died a few years ago, and he was just really a problem, and not very well versed in what his father did, and for some reason, I'm getting much more progress now the last few years than the 18 to 20 years I've been doing
Great.
this
That's
before.
good news, though.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah.
And I've got a good team, and a couple of young kids that are really savvy in AI and that kind of stuff.
Here's a weird question for you.
Sure.
Do you have kids?
No, never got married. I tried in 1992. I fell in love with a girl here, and it was the same. There's a tradition, like if you're dating and you're walking around in November and it's the first snow, you're going to be happening. So, I said, let's get married. She said, yeah. And I really love this girl. My mom met her. She went to America. I met everybody. And then her dad said no because I was half Korean. It didn't matter whether I was Dosan's grandson, and then I got over that. And then I met another girl here in 1999, and it wasn't such a shocker. And I completely understood, having a degree in anthropology for whatever that means. Her parents didn't want her to leave the country, so that was much more acceptable than the racial thing.
Yeah.
So then I just got busy and living in America, and Caucasian women weren't that interesting, and Korean American women were so materialistic. You know, you had to have special shoes and suits and I was a surfer, you know.
Yeah.
And most of the Korean women hated the beach, you know. So it was just this. So then I just, you know, kind of became a permanent bachelor. But I took care of my mom for 5 years. She lived to be 100. And,
Wow.
And her life was,
Yes.
and so at one point I realized that her life was more important than mine, and so just kind of became the driver and cook and houseboy. But she gave a speech to Korean college kids the day before she died.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So she was quite a person. But that's probably another show.
I want to ask you this because I haven't yet. In 1973, how old were you?
18.
18.
Yeah.
And you met Park Chung Hee.
Yeah. And
as a halfie with long hair.
Yes.
What was that like? Because that's like height of Yushin almost. He's proper into his dictatorship by then.
Totally. But you know, he respected Dosan, and Philip had been here so much, and so a couple funny stories. I didn't have a white shirt. You know, I had like a herringbone jacket and velour bell-bottom pants.
Yeah.
And so I had to go to this official event, and they said, you know, you got to have a white shirt. So my uncle, being Mr. Fashion, took me down to Myeongdong, get a shirt in a couple hours. So I was bigger then. I was playing rugby and football and stuff. So they measured me, but they didn't measure my forearm. And so when the shirt came, I couldn't get my forearm. This is in November. It's snowing. So my mom grabbed scissors, cuts the cuff off, pins it into the jacket, and I got no sleeve.
So it just looks like the shirt's coming out.
And so I'm
Clever
shaking hands with Park Chung Hee. And so, you know, I had demonstrated against the Vietnam War, you know, and I'd gone to a military academy as a young kid and hated the military, even though my parents were both military. And so they drilled me. You got to show the top of your head. You got to bend down to this guy.
You've got to show the top of your head.
Yeah,
I get it now, but I've not heard that being said.
To get that.
Got to get down low enough.
And so, okay, you know, I'll do it. Don't worry, I'm going to be respectful. I looked him straight in the eye. If you see the picture, I didn't give a shit who he was, and shook his hand, and just, you know, and I forget the guy's name, but he was the head CIA bodyguard guy, and he was the one that got blown up with him in Burma or wherever he died. And he's standing behind, and this look on his face like, who the heck is this guy? So it was the picture's really interesting. It was a clash of societal change, you know.
Culture war.
And what's funny is after, you know, like later on in life, a lot of the young people here were trying to dress what I look like, you know? And so, I mean, it took a while, but...
maybe you were the inspiration for the orangey jock in the 90s.
Oh, no.
When they all started doing that.
I was here for that, you know. But, you know, it's like, that's just part of, you know, social change and stuff.
Yeah. You said that you've met 9 presidents and 5 of them have gone to jail.
Yeah.
Tell me something weird about somebody that we might not know, like an impression or an encounter or something that only comes from direct experience of being around these people. Because I think now we know Park Chung Hee is quite short but strong handshake, and you only know that if you meet the man. So tell me something about meeting.
Probably Lee Myung-bak.
Does he smell nice or what?
No, he was real greasy.
Okay.
You know, and when I met him is when that Seo Young-hoon guy had appointed Erica Mihei Kim as president of the Dosan Memorial Foundation. I was living here. I went livid. You know, I said, she doesn't know anything. She was rich. And this guy was always after the money. So she slept with him, with Lee Myung-bak.
Okay.
And so we were in L.A., and it was just really an odd thing. What she was doing as president of the Dosan Memorial Foundation. Lee Myung-bak was ugly.
His nickname or depiction over here was the Rat.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't say that disparagingly, but that's what it was in the newspapers.
And
2 megabytes.
So just looking like, you know, you're the mayor of Seoul, and then you're going to be the president, you know? And so it's just, that was one. The other one's Park Geun-hye, you know, and Park Geun-hye came to L.A., and we were always used, So we were going to have to sit with her with some chinilpa, with Mike Hong Myung-gi. Hong Chan is a guaranteed chinilpa, if you look him up in the book that Yoon Kyung-no published. And so I told her, you can't use us. We'll meet with you privately in your hotel room, or just because we knew your father, we knew your mother. They did a chungmei with her sister and me when she ran Children's Park, and I'm going, there is no way I'm dating or even going to get near this. And just her kind of clunky attitude, so just that was, I was unimpressed, but I feel sorry for her because, I worked hard on the Sewol Ho thing afterwards, but when she went to, I think, was it 2015 when Obama was president and he crammed this agreement down her throat with Abe? Yeah, they just took advantage of her. And I felt bad about that.
It was part of the THAAD agreement, wasn't it?
Yeah,
as well,
yeah.
Missile defense here, which angered China and which caused the Hallyu ban.
Right. And the thing was that only went to Pyeongtaek. It didn't protect Seoul. So it was just the Americans protecting Americans. I'm proud to be an American. I'm lucky I grew up there, but American foreign policy in Korea has just been horrid.
Did North Korea invite you ever up there? Do you ever go there?
Yeah.
Have you met the Kims?
No. My grandfather's sister, Ahn Chang-ho, is a patriot there. We're from Pyongyang. And she's buried in the National Cemetery, but she was vice chairwoman of the Women's Workers' Party in 1948, but it was because of her independence movement stuff. That's one thing that people don't realize, the change of if you want to call it communism, like with Yo and Young, Choman-shik, there's these other patriots where it's a national type of a socialism, not the Stalinist regime and all these other things. But so they invited us for Kim Il-sung's 80th birthday, which would have been 1992. And then the South Korean government, we were getting letters from North Korea. The North Korean CIA came to our house, and the guy Kim Jong-il, I think it was a Kim Jong-il button or Kim Il-sung button.
Big lads in dark suits and dark sunglasses?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Tall and thin. The Pyongyang people are a little bit bigger than the South Koreans earlier, now with the change in diet. So the South Korean government gets a hold of it. And so my grandfather's death day is March 10th. And so this birthday is April 15th or something like that. So I'm living here, so I don't get any of the benefits. So all of the families invited. They all come. They're touring all over. And they figured that the Ahn family siblings were too old to come to Korea, go back to America, go to Beijing, and then go to North Korea. And so they cut the trip off.
That's sad.
Yeah. And then I wanted to go with a group of doctors who milk, and it was a pretty good program.
Calcium and health.
They torpedoed the boat off of Incheon.
The RAS Cheonan.
Yeah. And then the next time I was going to go, a poor lady kind of strayed across the DMZ on the beach and they shot her, so those trips got canceled. And then I was trying to sneak in through Choreo Tours.
Yeah.
And just as a nobody to go surfing because they had a surf camp. Yeah. But that's when the sanctions happened. And did I talk to you about the Congress story where the Obama had cut off luxury water, so the surfing would have changed the way people think, so I was really hoping to go for that. But yeah, I haven't been. I want to go, but
I hope to catch some waves there with you one day.
Yeah,
imagine that. We don't know what the future might hold, but your mum lived to 100, so you got a little bit.
Yeah.
Everybody weighs a bit less in the water. It's a bit easier. Although surfing's really. Next time we'll do a lot more on surfing because I think there's some things to explore on that. But perhaps as we bring this one to a close,
absolutely.
What do you wish people knew more about your grandfather or about teaching and career and independence movements? And what are we missing, or what don't people recognize enough?
I think when you look at the people who really, sacrificed their lives and were leaders of this, I mean, without them, we wouldn't be sitting here as, Korea, So I really think that they have some sense of not a heavy obligation, but just to recognize what they did. But the problem is the story that's been told is not as attractive as it really is. The story that should be told commands more respect and compassion, where, today it's just almost like commercialization, like a Hallmark holiday. It's just, it's like, so but, also that's my responsibility. At this point, I have this opportunity, like meeting with you and talking and whatever audience I can get. And now there's a team of some Independence family people and other people that I've worked here that really want to see things change. So that's what I'd just like to see. Actually, the Korean education system and the Korean government change the way they present this part of history.
In an indirect way, having you here to talk to me, that affects now how I go and speak to the hundreds of young Korean adults that I see every day. And it helps remind me that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and the idea that society prospers when people plant trees under whose shade they will not get to sit. And maybe that's something with your grandfather who passed in 1937? 38, forgive me.
No, that's
and then doesn't get to see the fruits of all that labor and effort that we get to enjoy and sometimes take for granted, perhaps.
Yes.
And so maybe that's why history is important, because this will happen somehow.
Yeah. And so for people to understand through what you do and other people what I do, that somehow, and the reality of it is the gift.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening and watching to this still, please get in touch. You can find Philip online. You got websites, and
Dosan.org is one.
We'll put links to that there, and please leave comments and ask questions and get the conversation going, because I'm sure there's much that I missed in what I was trying to do, but we'll get there somehow, some way.
I'd be happy to come back, or whenever. We'll keep in touch. And, it's like I put myself out on a limb, and I'm out there to have questions or criticism, and what I say I believe is the truth, and if I can offer proof, I will. But I don't shy away from anything.
And there's a difference when you see people in person. When you're in the same room and you're sweating without the aircon on and you're experiencing it, right? Like it's different then from just somebody being an online face. So very grateful for you taking the time.
Yeah, there's going to be some kind of a Zoom conference in the near future that anybody can join, and then I hope to come back and be giving a public speech sometime soon. But thanks again, bro.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please click, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. Korea Deconstructed. This was Philip Ahn Cuddy, Flip, talking about his grandfather, Ahn Chang-ho, Dosan. Until next time, peace.
Hanyang.